Etta, a grandmother who truly loves her grandson, would not let his future drown in her pride. Whitney said that in my own bedroom 3 days after I buried my husband, and my son stood beside her, silent as a locked door. Jonah was in the hallway, wearing the little white shirt I had ironed for the funeral. His sleeves were too long, his collar was crooked, and in both hands he held the red toy truck Ray had given him the Christmas before. He did not understand trusts, signatures, estates, or the kind of greed grown folks dress up in soft voices. But he understood fear. I could see it in his eyes. Darius placed a folder on my dresser like he was laying down a Bible. "Mom," he said at first, soft, careful, almost loving, "we need to handle things before people outside this family start making decisions for us." Whitney stood beside him in a cream-colored suit, her hair pinned smooth, her nails pale as milk. In public, she called me Mom. In private, when there were no church ladies or neighbors around, I was Etta, just Etta, like I was a tenant late on rent. I looked at that folder, then at my son's face, and for the first time in my life, I wondered when his eyes had stopped looking like mine. My name is Etta Mae Lawson. I am 68 years old, born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, with Southern roots my mama never let me forget. For 31 years, I worked night shifts as a nurse. I cleaned wounds, held dying hands, prayed over babies that came too early, and learned to read pain before a person admitted it was there. My husband, Raymond Lawson, was not a loud man. Folks called him Ray. He made his money in real estate, but not the flashy kind with billboards and champagne. Ray bought old row houses people had given up on. He repaired roofs, fought banks, argued with city inspectors, and kept families in neighborhoods where their grandparents had lived. He believed a house was more than brick. He said it was where a person kept their dignity. We had 2 children. Darius was our firstborn. From the day he learned to walk, people said he would carry the Lawson name. Ray took him to meetings, showed him buildings, let him shake hands with men who wore expensive watches. At first it was pride, a father showing off his boy. But praise can turn poisonous when nobody teaches a child the difference between being loved and being owed. Then came Lena, our quiet one. She did not demand space. She made her own. By 36, she was living above a small bookstore in Mount Vernon, working with housing nonprofits, helping families Ray used to help in his own way. Because she never asked for anything, we made the mistake of thinking she needed nothing. Ray died on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, reaching for sugar to make sweet tea, when his assistant called. "Stroke," she said. "Office," she said. "Hospital," she said. But by the time I heard the word "sorry," the room had already gone silent around me. I did not cry right away. I just stood with my hand on the counter, staring at a glass I had not filled. Darius and Whitney flew in the next morning with Jonah. My son hugged me fast, like a man checking off an obligation. "Mom," he said, "from now on, I'll handle everything." And at the time, I thought grief had made me sensitive. I thought maybe he was trying to be strong. But there are moments a woman's spirit hears the truth before her mind is ready to accept it. Because my husband had not been cold in the ground before people started speaking of legacy louder than love. And in that bedroom, with Jonah listening from the hall and Whitney's folder waiting on my dresser, I understood something that made my knees weak, but my eyes clear. They had not come home to mourn Ray. They had come home to take his place. The first thing Whitney changed was the obituary. I had written it at the kitchen table before sunrise, with Ray's old reading glasses sitting beside my coffee cup. I wrote about the man I knew, how he liked burnt toast, how he kept peppermint candies in his coat pocket for children at church, how he once drove across Baltimore in a thunderstorm to fix a furnace for an old widow who could not pay him until the first of the month. Whitney read it once and gave me the kind of smile people use when they are about to insult you politely. "It's sweet," she said, "but it doesn't capture Mr. Lawson's stature." Mr. Lawson, not Daddy Ray, as she used to say when she wanted something. Not your husband, not the man we lost. Mr. Lawson. Darius stood near the window, scrolling through his phone. "Whitney knows how these things should sound, Mom. People will be watching." People will be watching. That was the first time I heard grief turned into public relations. By noon, the obituary had Ray sounding like a corporate monument. Visionary, founder, patriarch, strategic leader. There was a whole paragraph about Darius continuing the Lawson family mission. Lena's name was tucked near the end, neat and small, like an afterthought someone remembered before printing. When I asked why the photo of Ray and Jonah on the porch was missing, Whitney touched my wrist. "That picture is personal, Etta. Beautiful, but personal. We need something with legacy." She chose a photograph of Ray shaking hands in front of a renovated building, wearing the Navy suit he hated because the collar always scratched his neck. The service was supposed to be at New Hope Baptist, where Ray had served on the building committee for 20 years. Whitney moved the reception to a private club near the harbor, the kind of place with valet parking, white tablecloths, and men who spoke softly because they were used to being obeyed. "Dad earned elegance," Darius said. I wanted to tell him, Ray earned peace. Ray earned fried chicken from Sister Mabel's kitchen, pound cake wrapped in foil, and old men telling stories too long beside the fellowship hall coffee urn. But I had learned something after 31 years of nursing. When people think you are too tired to notice, let them talk. They will hand you the map to their own intentions. So I sat still. I watched Whitney remove the picture board Lena made and replace it with framed business photos. I watched Darius accept condolences like campaign donations. I watched cousins who had not called Ray in years pat my son's shoulder and say, "Your father prepared you for this." Prepared him for what? A coffin had just closed. At the service, Jonah sat beside me. His little shoes did not reach the floor. Every few minutes he leaned against my side, and I could feel him trying not to cry too loudly. When the choir sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," Lena reached for my hand. Her palm was cold. I squeezed it once. That was all we could manage. Afterward, at that polished club Ray would have disliked, people stood under soft lights and talked about assets, buildings, transitions. They used my husband's name like a key to doors they had already picked out. Then Jonah tugged my sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, "if Daddy doesn't keep Grandpa's company, do I have to leave my school?" The room around me blurred. I looked down at that child, at his round, scared eyes, at the toy truck still tucked under his arm. And I felt something inside me go quiet in a way grief had not made it quiet. A 7-year-old does not invent a fear like that. Somebody had planted it in him. I kissed the top of Jonah's head and told him, "No, baby. Grown folks' worries are not yours to carry." But across the room, Whitney was watching me, not grieving, not comforting, watching. 3 days after the funeral, I sat on my bed folding Ray's gray sweater. The house still smelled like lilies. Darius knocked once and came in before I answered. Whitney followed with a leather folder. "Mom," Darius said, careful as a man stepping over broken glass, "we need to talk." I kept the sweater in my lap. "Then talk." Whitney laid the folder beside Ray's watch. "It's mostly administrative," she said, "a temporary continuity measure." "Whitney, don't soften words for me." She opened it. The first page said, "First Amendment to the Lawson Family Continuity Trust." Behind it sat a spousal non-objection and settlement acknowledgement. Long names for a short knife. Whitney explained that Ray had wanted the Lawson name protected. Jonah's future depended on quick decisions, and banks did not like uncertainty. Darius, as eldest son, needed temporary authority until everything settled. Temporary. That word kept coming back. Wearing a clean shirt and dirty shoes. I read every line. The document said I acknowledged my emotional condition after bereavement. It said I would not challenge Darius as managing trustee. It said I waived my right to request records or object to transfers done for family continuity. I raised my eyes. This says I'm not fit to ask questions. Whitney sighed softly. "No, Etta. It says you're grieving." Well, those are not the same thing. Darius stepped closer. "Mother, nobody is trying to take anything from you." There it was. Mother, not mom. The word he used when he wanted distance to sound like respect. Then I saw Ray's signature. My breath caught. Ray's R had always been wide, almost proud, and on important papers he dragged the last stroke like he was underlining his name. This R was stiff. The final line stopped too soon. "Has Samuel Whitaker seen this?" I asked. Whitney smiled without showing teeth. "Samuel is a fine attorney, but he moves slowly. We're trying to prevent confusion." "Confusion for who?" Darius's jaw tightened. "For Jonah, for all of us." From the hallway came the sound of a toy truck rolling over wood. Jonah was listening. I closed the folder. Whitney's face changed for half a second, just enough for me to see the woman behind the manners. "I need time," I said. Darius stared at the folder like I had slapped him. Dad trusted me. I held Ray's sweater tighter. "Then you should not be afraid of me reading before I sign." And the room went still. Whitney reached for the folder, but I put my palm on top of it. "Leave it," I said. For the first time since Ray died, my son looked at me not as a grieving mother, but as an obstacle. Paper can be more dangerous than a raised hand. It does not leave a bruise where neighbors can see. That night, after Darius and Whitney left, the house became too quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. Peace lets a woman breathe. Quiet, after betrayal, presses its hand over her mouth. I stood outside Ray's study with my palm on the knob. For 3 days I had walked past that door like it belonged to a stranger. His mug was probably still on the desk. His lamp was probably bent toward papers he had studied before God called his name. I did not want to go in, but I kept seeing that signature, that stiff little R pretending to be my husband. So I opened the door. The room smelled like leather, dust, and pipe tobacco. Ray had stopped smoking years ago, but still kept in a wooden box. His chair sat pushed back from the desk. One pen lay uncapped beside a yellow legal pad. At the top, Ray had written 3 words, Holloway Row Leases. I touched the paper with 2 fingers, just to feel where he had left himself. On the wall were photographs most people never saw. Ray in work boots. Ray beside a furnace with his sleeves rolled up. Ray and Lena at a meeting, her face serious, his face proud in a way I had been too busy to notice. I opened the middle drawer. Receipts, old church programs, a cracked pair of glasses. The bottom drawer stuck. Ray had always said he would fix it. It stayed broken long enough to become familiar. I pulled harder, and a blue photo album slid forward. Under it was a white envelope. For Etta only. My hand shook before I touched it. Inside was one folded letter written in Ray's careful block print. Etta Mae, if you are reading this, then I waited too long to say what should have been said out loud. I covered my mouth. Ray wrote that Darius had begun asking questions he should not have known to ask. Whitney had contacted one investment manager and suggested I was declining. She had used my age like a crowbar. She had used grief before grief even arrived. He told me not to sign anything, not one page, not one acknowledgement, not one temporary measure. Then came the line that cut me deepest. Trust Lena. She never needed the throne, so she is the only one I trust near it. I read it twice through tears. My quiet Lena, the child who learned not to interrupt, the daughter who brought soup when I had the flu and left before I could thank her. Ray had seen her, maybe late, but he had seen her, and I had not seen her enough. The letter ended with instructions. Meet Samuel Whitaker alone. Do not warn Darius. Do not underestimate Whitney. Keep a copy of everything. One sentence was darker than the rest. A signature can be stolen, but a man's conscience leaves fingerprints. I folded the letter, placed it inside my black church coat, and turned off Ray's lamp. The next morning, I dressed like I was going to church. Black coat, low heels, pearl earrings Ray bought me near Lexington Market. I put his letter in my purse, where I used to keep emergency cash. I did not call Darius. I did not tell Whitney. A grieving woman learns quickly which doors to close quietly. Samuel Whitaker's office sat in Towson, on the 2nd floor of a brick building. He'd been Ray's attorney for more than 20 years. When he saw me, he stood. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, "I'm sorry." I handed him Ray's letter. He read it once, then removed his glasses. He hoped he would have more time, Samuel said. My fingers tightened around my purse. "So you knew?" "Well, I knew enough to prepare, not enough to accuse before your husband had proof." He led me into a conference room and shut the door. On the table was a binder with Ray's name on the spine. Samuel opened it to papers signed 12 days before Ray died. Real signatures, wide R, long final stroke. My husband's hand, not a thief's imitation. He explained slowly. The house on Ashburton Street raised personal property, and a steady income stream were protected for me. Not as charity, as my right. The business properties were placed into the Lawson Community Stewardship Trust. Lena was named primary trustee, with an independent attorney required to approve major sales. I stared at him. Lena? Your husband said she understood houses as homes, not trophies. The words landed hard because they were true. Then Samuel turned another page. Jonah had his own trust for education, health care, counseling, housing, and necessary support. He would receive limited control at 25 and full control at 30. Darius and Whitney were barred from managing $1 of it. I sat back. Ray knew they would use that child. Samuel did not answer quickly. That was answer enough. Then he played a recording. Whitney's voice filled the room. She told an investment manager I was showing signs of cognitive decline and that Darius needed emergency access before assets became vulnerable. I felt my face burn, not because she lied, because she had practiced saying it kindly. Samuel turned off the recording. Mrs. Lawson, the document they brought you is not part of your husband's estate plan. I know. It may be forged. I know that too. For the first time, Samuel looked surprised. I was a night nurse for 31 years, I told him. Whitney's manners don't impress me. Samuel closed the binder. Then we proceed carefully. I stood, and my knees did not tremble. Ray was dead. My son was lying. Whitney had put old age around my neck like a chain. But now I knew where the lock was. Lena lived above a little bookstore on a quiet block in Mount Vernon, the kind of place where the stairs creaked and somebody was always burning coffee downstairs. I had been there before, but not often enough. That truth followed me up each step. When Lena opened the door, she was wearing jeans, a faded Morgan State sweatshirt, and one silver hoop earring because the other was still in her hand. She looked at my church coat, then at my face. "Mama," she said, "what happened?" For a moment, I could not speak, not because I did not know where to begin, but because standing in my daughter's doorway reminded me how many times I had let her stand in mine. Her apartment was small, warm, and full of life. Books stacked beside the sofa, a pothos plant trailing over the window, a mug of chamomile tea going cold on the table. On the counter sat a foil-covered plate from some community supper she had probably helped organize and forgotten to eat. I sat at her little kitchen table and told her everything. The folder, Ray's signature, Whitney's voice on the recording, Samuel's binder, Jonah's trust, her name as trustee. Lena did not interrupt. That was her way. She listened like she was building a room around every word. When I finished, she leaned back and looked toward the window. "I don't want his money," she said. "I know." "No, Mama, I mean it. I don't want Darius looking at me like I stole something he already spent in his head." That hurt because it was too close to the truth. I reached into my purse and gave her Ray's letter. She read it slowly. Halfway through, her mouth tightened. By the end, her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. "He came here," she said. "Ray?" She nodded. "About 2 months ago. Brought chicken salad from that place he liked near Charles Street. Sat right there where you're sitting. I looked at the chair beneath me like it had become sacred. He said he owed me an apology, Lena continued. Said he put too much shine on Darius because Darius was loud enough to reflect it back. Said he mistook my quiet for not needing anything. I folded my hands, but they would not stay still. Lena gave a sad little laugh. I told him I was fine. But you always say that. Well, I know. And she looked at me then. Because when I was young, fine was the easiest way to keep from needing a place at the table. No mother wants to hear she taught her child how to disappear. But if the truth knocks, you either open the door or spend your life pretending you do not hear it. I am sorry, I said. Lena's face changed, not softened exactly, more like something in her stopped bracing for a blow. I should have seen you better, I told her. Your daddy should have too. But I'm here now, and I'm asking for your help. She looked at Ray's letter again. I don't want a throne, she said. I never did. Then maybe that's why he trusted you near one. Lena stood, went to the window, and looked down at the street. Cars passed below, headlights sliding over wet pavement. For a long minute, she said nothing. Then she turned back, picked up her coat from the chair, and slipped both feet into sneakers. What are you doing? I asked. She grabbed her keys. I'm going with you, Mama. Not a hug, not a speech, no choir rising in the background. Just my daughter choosing to stand beside me after years of being left to stand alone. Samuel sent us to a brick ranch house in Catonsville with wind chimes on the porch and cameras under the gutters. Ruth Ann Price opened the door before we knocked twice. She was my age, with close-cropped gray hair, square glasses, and a cardigan buttoned wrong. Years ago, we had worked the same hospital floor. Ruth Ann could start an IV in the dark and spot a lie before a doctor finished his sentence. After nursing, she became a forensic accountant. Etta Mae, she said, you looked like grief came in the front door and trouble came through the basement. Well, that covers it. Her dining room had no dining left in it. 2 monitors, a scanner, folders, and a mug that read, "Don't confuse me with someone patient," covered the table. Lena handed her the folder Whitney had left in my bedroom. Ruth Ann slipped on blue gloves and opened the papers like they had insulted her. For nearly an hour, she said almost nothing. She scanned pages, enlarged signatures, checked dates, compared notary stamps, and pulled file information from the PDF. Lena stood by the window. I sat so still, my back ached. At last, Ruth Ann leaned back. Well, she said, somebody got ambitious and lazy at the same time. My mouth went dry. Tell me. She turned the screen toward us. This PDF was created 2 days after Ray died. Lena whispered, After? After. And this signature wasn't drawn. It was lifted. She opened an old lease Samuel had sent over. Ray's name sat at the bottom, strong and familiar. Then she placed the trust amendment beside it. Same curve, same tiny ink break near the R. Only the ending had been clipped. They cut your husband's signature from this lease and pasted it where they needed him alive. And the room tilted. I had seen families fight over jewelry while a body was still warm. But making a dead man sign away his own will was colder. Ruth Ann kept going. The notary stamp belongs to a woman who hasn't held an active commission in over 2 years. The file path points to a device tied to Whitney's consulting firm. Then she opened an email header. Message to a banking officer. Subject line. Executed amendment for transitional control. Sender looks like Darius's secondary account, but the IP routes through Whitney's office network. Lena's face went hard. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. Proof does not make betrayal hurt less. It only stops you from calling your instincts crazy. Ruth Ann looked at me. Greed gets sloppy when it thinks grief is blind. I thought of Whitney's cream suit, Darius saying mother, Jonah rolling that toy truck across the hallway. My grief has eyes, I said. And for the first time since Ray died, the truth had more than a heartbeat. It had a paper trail. Ruth Ann called at 6:14 the next morning. Etta Mae, she said, come over, bring Lena, and don't eat first. Her dining table was covered with bank statements lined up like they were ready to confess. She tapped one folder. Jonah Education Reserve. Lena frowned. I never heard of that. Neither had Samuel, Ruth Ann said. It was opened for tuition, counseling, medical care, housing support, anything the boy might need after Ray's death. Then she slid a page toward me. $438,000 moved through it. Jonah's full name sat at the top. Jonah Marcus Lawson, 7 years old. Moved where? I asked. $89,000 for the harbor reception, flowers, and penthouse rental. Brand for my husband's funeral. $128,000 toward Darius's loan. $54,000 to a PR firm preparing Darius Lawson, the next steward of a Baltimore legacy. Lena gave a bitter breath. Steward. Ruth Ann touched the last line. And $167,000 as a deposit tied to Holloway Row. That name pulled air from my chest. Holloway Row was 3 blocks of brick homes where teachers, bus drivers, nurses, and church ushers had lived for decades. Ray fought to keep rents fair when investors circled. He used to say, "A house is not a legacy if you have to throw people out to polish its name." There it was, his promise, turned into a down payment. If you are listening, please leave a like and comment what you would advise a grandmother to do when family hides greed behind a child's name. The truth in Jonah's account was only the first door that opened. They had not only stolen money, they had laid a child's name over the hole, hoping decent people would be too gentle to look underneath. Can we prove who authorized it? Lena asked. Ruth Ann turned another page. Darius confirmed 2 transfers through the banking portal. Whitney's office prepared supporting documents. The bank was told it was urgent protection for a minor beneficiary. Protection. That word had become the silk glove over every dirty hand. I thought of Jonah asking if he would lose his school. I thought of Whitney's hand on his shoulder. I thought of Darius using his own boy as a shield. While reaching for money Ray never meant him to touch. Print everything, I said. I folded the statement until the paper made a sharp crease. They can call me old, emotional, confused, whatever helps them sleep. But they put that baby's name on their greed. Outside Ruth Ann's window, Baltimore was waking like nothing had happened. In that ordinary morning light, I understood the fight had changed. This was no longer about Ray's estate. This was about whether the living still have the nerve to protect what the dead had promised. Lena did not sleep that night. By morning, Ray's old property lists covered my dining table beside oatmeal neither of us touched. Ruth Ann had given her filings, company names, transfer records, and pages that looked to me like legal alphabet soup. LLC after LLC. Numbers, addresses. Darius would have seen a maze and called Whitney. Lena saw music. She ran one finger down a column and stopped at Morning Mercy Partners. "Mama," she said, "do you remember what Daddy used to hum when he checked the basement pipes on Ashburton?" "Great is thy faithfulness," she nodded. "Morning by morning, new mercies I see." Then she pointed to Nearer Holdings, Grace Table LLC, Sparrowgate Management. I sat down slowly. Ray had hidden his business the way some men hide cash in coffee cans, but he used pieces of our life. Hymns I sang while cooking, songs from New Hope Baptist when the roof leaked and the organ wheezed. Things Darius never bothered to remember because they did not sound like power. Lena opened a county land record and turned the laptop toward me. "Holloway Row isn't held by the company Darius thinks it is," she said. "That's just the outer shell." She clicked again. Another layer appeared, then another. At the center was Grace Table Community LLC, tied to the Lawson Community Stewardship Trust. Any major sale required approval from the primary trustee and an independent attorney. "Primary trustee," I said. Lena gave me a tired look. Me. For a moment, she did not look proud. She looked burdened, like Ray had left a heavy coat on her shoulders. Ruth Ann arrived with gas station coffee and no patience. She leaned over the laptop. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Whitney saw the porch and thought she owned the house." Lena pulled up an email from the out-of-state investment fund. "Close before Widows' Council intervenes." I read that line until it became a voice. They knew enough to hurry, enough to circle my grief like buzzards. "What happens if they push the sale anyway?" I asked. Lena straightened. "Then they expose themselves. They need my signature or Samuel's. Without it, the deal is a dead branch dressed like a tree." I almost smiled. All those years, I thought Lena stayed away from Ray's business because she did not care. But she remembered what mattered. Not handshakes, not suits. The songs, the promises, the people behind the doors. She touched the screen where Holloway Row sat in black letters. "Daddy trusted my memory more than Darius's ambition," she said. Outside, a city bus sighed to a stop at the corner. Baltimore kept moving. But Ray's map had finally opened, and the daughter we once mistook for quiet had become the only one who could read it. By Sunday, my name had traveled farther than I had. I had barely left the house, but cousins in Randallstown, deacons at New Hope, and one woman from Ray's committee had all heard the same sentence. Poor Etta is not herself, not grieving, not heartbroken, not herself. That is how people begin stealing a woman while she is still standing in the room. Darius told my sister in North Carolina he was worried I was being influenced. Whitney told one of Ray's partners that Lena had inserted herself during a vulnerable period. By Monday, Samuel had a letter from a psychologist Whitney knew. It did not diagnose me. It did not need to. It used soft words that smelled like poison. bereavement-related impairment, reduced decision-making stability, family concern recommended. Ruth Ann snorted. More fog than a Chesapeake morning. But I understood. It was meant to frighten banks, relatives, and anyone who believed gray hair made a woman fragile. That Sunday after service, Darius came to the house with Jonah. No Whitney. That told me plenty. Jonah stepped in first, holding a paper bag. Daddy said you like lemon cookies. Oh, I do, baby. I kissed his cheek. Darius stood behind him in a dark coat, looking around my living room as if measuring what might soon belong to him. Mother, he said, we need to stop this. I sent Jonah to the kitchen for milk. The boy walked slowly, ears open. There is no this, I said. There are papers you brought me and questions you cannot answer. His face tightened. Lena has filled your head. Lena finally got a chair at the table. He laughed once. She wants to punish me because Dad trusted me first. Ray trusted you with chances, Darius, not ownership. That struck him. For 1 second, the child I raised flashed behind his eyes. Then pride stepped forward. Jonah needs stability, he said louder. He needs school, routine, his parents. He needs to know his grandmother is not tearing this family apart. From the kitchen, a glass touched the counter. Jonah returned holding milk with both hands. His lips trembled. Grandma, he asked, if you don't sign, will Daddy go to jail? The room fell away. I looked at my son. He did not look ashamed. That was the moment a hope inside me died clean. I knelt and took the glass before Jonah spilled it. No, sweetheart, I said, you are not responsible for grown folks' choices. Not mine, not your daddy's, not anybody's. Darius looked away first. After they left, I stood at the sink until the nausea passed. I did not cry. Tears would have been too easy. Blood is sacred, but it is not a license. And my son had just used his own child to knock on my conscience like a debt collector. The invitation called it the Lawson Legacy Reception, not a memorial, not a gathering of family, a reception. Whitney had chosen a penthouse near the inner harbor, all glass walls and gold light, with waiters carrying trays of crab cakes too small to satisfy anybody. Outside, the water looked black under the evening sky. Inside, my husband's name floated from mouth to mouth like a password. Ray would have hated every minute of it. He did not like rooms where people laughed without showing their teeth. He did not trust men who shook hands before asking about your mother. And he surely would not have wanted a bartender in a bow tie serving champagne under a framed photo of him looking like he owned half of Baltimore. Darius stood near the window in a navy suit, greeting guests as if he had already inherited the earth. Whitney stayed close to him, one hand resting lightly on his arm, correcting names, guiding conversations, smiling whenever someone important approached. Jonah stood beside her in a little blazer. That was what cut me. A child should be allowed to be bored at grown folks' parties. He should have been eating too many cookies, hiding under a table, or asking when he could go home. Instead, Whitney kept her hand on his shoulder like he was proof. Lena walked in with me. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry except small silver hoops. People noticed her, but not warmly. By then the rumor had done its work. Some looked at her like she had dragged me there by the wrist. Darius raised a glass. My father believed in stewardship, he said. He believed the Lawson name meant responsibility. Tonight, as we honor him, we also look forward. Forward, the favorite word of people trying to outrun what they did yesterday. A few guests clapped. One cousin dabbed her eyes, though I noticed she kept watching the photographer. Then Whitney spoke. "Everything we do is for the next generation," she said, drawing Jonah a little closer. The boy's face went red. He stared at his shoes. I did not move. I let my anger sit down inside me and behave. Near the back of the room, a young woman in a dark green dress stood by the service table. I had seen her before at a bank office with Ray years ago. Keisha Bell. Ray had helped her with a scholarship after her mother got sick. She looked at Whitney, then at Darius, then quickly away. Lena saw it too. Later, when guests were busy praising a dead man they had barely known, Lena stepped into the hall. I watched Keisha follow after a few seconds, clutching her phone like it might burn her. They returned separately. On the ride home, Lena was quiet until we passed the Washington Monument, lit pale against the night. "Keisha has records," she said. I turned to her. She said Whitney pushed an urgent transfer through a banking officer. Darius confirmed it through the secure portal. There's a call log, maybe more. I looked out at Baltimore, at the row houses, corner stores, church signs, and bus stops Ray had spent his life refusing to abandon. That party was meant to crown my son. Instead, under all that glass and gold, the first witness stepped out of the dark. Samuel's conference room had no softness in it. Long table, gray carpet, a pitcher of water nobody touched. Darius came in like a man entering a board meeting he expected to win. Whitney followed in a charcoal suit, calm enough to fool strangers. Jonah walked between them, holding his father's hand. Lena went stiff beside me. Samuel looked over his glasses. "Jonah should wait outside with my assistant." And Whitney smiled. "He is part of this family." "Well, he is not part of this meeting." Darius frowned. "You don't decide where my son sits." "A child is not a legal exhibit," Samuel said. For once, Whitney had no polished answer. Jonah looked at me. I opened my hand. "Go on, baby. Miss Paula has cookies." He hesitated, then walked out. When the door closed, the room felt less cruel. At the table sat Samuel, an independent trust attorney, Ray's financial representative, a note-taker, Lena, me, Darius, and Whitney. No judge, no jury, just paper, memory, and silence that makes guilty people thirsty. Darius leaned back. "So what is this, an ambush?" I looked at him. "Funny word coming from you." Whitney touched his sleeve, telling him, without words, to behave. Samuel pressed a button. The screen lit up. Ray appeared in his study. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. He wore the brown cardigan I used to tease him about. His face looked thinner, but his eyes were clear. "If you are seeing this," Ray said, "then I am either gone or unable to speak for myself." My hand found Lena's under the table. "Darius, you are my son, and I love you. But love does not make dishonesty inheritance. I helped build a hunger in you by calling it ambition too many times. That was my failure as a father." Darius stared, color leaving his face. Ray continued, "Whitney, I respected your intelligence. I should have feared how easily you could make cruelty sound responsible." Whitney blinked once, only once. Then his voice softened. Lena, I owe you more than paper can repay. You were quiet, and I mistook quiet for contentment. I am sorry I made you feel like the spare room in your own family. Lena covered her mouth. And Etta Mae, Ray said, you are not a woman who needs managing. You stood beside me when I had more debt than sense. Half the dignity people credited to me was built by your patience, your shifts, and your prayers. That was when my tears came. Not loud, just true. Ray leaned closer to the camera. No one is to use my grandson as a shield. No one is to use my wife's grief as a doorway. And no one is to sell the homes I protected just to polish the Lawson name. And the video ended. Darius looked at the blank screen like he wanted to argue with a ghost. But ghosts sometimes leave better records than the living. Samuel did not speak after Ray's video ended. He let the silence work. Darius stared at the black screen, breathing hard. Whitney reached for her water, then stopped. For the first time, she looked unsure which face to wear. Samuel opened the binder. Mr. Lawson's final estate plan is valid, witnessed, notarized, and supported by medical capacity documentation. Copies slid across the table. My home on Ashburton Street remained mine. My income and right to records were protected. I was not a guest in the life I helped build. Lena was primary trustee of the Lawson Community Stewardship Trust. Any sale of Holloway Row required her approval and independent counsel. Jonah's trust would cover school, health care, counseling, and housing. Darius and Whitney could not manage $1. Darius slapped the table. This is ridiculous. Samuel did not blink. It is your father's instruction. Well, my father was pressured. Lena looked at him. By who, Darius? The daughter nobody thought mattered? His mouth closed. Samuel turned another page. Forgery? Undue influence? Financial exploitation? Misuse of a minor's assets? Or interference with Mr. Lawson's estate plan triggers forfeiture? Whitney leaned forward. You are making accusations without context. Ruth Ann rose. I brought context. She placed the fake amendment beside Ray's old lease. Same signature, same tiny ink break. The ending clipped and pasted, like a dead man could be edited. Then came the inactive notary record. Then the PDF metadata, created after Ray's death. Then the email from Darius's secondary account, routed through Whitney's office network. Keisha Bell sat near the door. Samuel asked one question at a time. She answered clearly. The bank had been told the transfer was urgent. The papers came from Whitney's office. Darius confirmed through the secure portal. Whitney's cheek twitched. Darius handled client access. Darius turned to her. Don't do that. I am stating facts. No, you're stepping away from the fire you lit. There it was, the crack in the glass. Darius stood. This is family business. Samuel looked up. Once forged papers touch a bank system, it stops being Sunday dinner. The words landed heavy. I looked at my firstborn, the boy who once ran through my kitchen with grape jelly on his shirt, and searched for him inside the man across from me. All I saw was someone angry he had been caught before he could call theft a birthright. Whitney gathered her papers too neatly. "This has been very emotional," she said. I laughed once. "No, Whitney. Emotional was burying my husband. This is accounting." No one answered. Numbers do not care who cries over them. And a stolen signature does not become holy just because a son wants what his father refused to give. 2 days after Samuel's conference, the bank froze the accounts tied to Jonah's name. Darius called me 17 times before noon. I did not answer. First he was hurt, then disappointed. By the last message he said, "Mother, you will regret making me look like a criminal." I saved them all. That evening, Lena came through my front door without knocking. Her face had gone pale, the same way it had the night Ray died. "Mama," she said, "Whitney booked flights." "Well, for who?" "Well, her and Jonah. One way, Baltimore to Tampa, tomorrow morning." The confirmation had gone to an old family email Ray set up for school notices and travel receipts. Whitney must have forgotten it, still forwarded to Lena. The message said, "Temporary reset away from family toxicity." Family toxicity. That was what they called it when a grandmother refused to let a child's name cover a theft. For 1 second, I wanted to run to Darius's house and scream until every neighbor turned on a light. But rage is not a plan. I called Samuel. He listened, then said, "Do not confront them. Forward me the email, print it, keep the header. I'm preparing an affidavit tonight." By 9, Ruth Ann was at my table with her laptop. Samuel had the flight record, banking notice, Jonah's account statements, and Darius's voicemails. Lena wrote what she had found. I wrote what Jonah had asked me in my kitchen, careful to say only what I knew. The next morning, in circuit court, Whitney arrived with Darius and a lawyer who looked too young to have lost sleep over anything. Her chin stayed high, but her hand tightened every time Jonah's name was spoken. The judge did not call them monsters. Courts do not work that way. He asked about the flight, the frozen account, the forged amendment, and why a child needed a one-way ticket out of Maryland during an active estate dispute. Whitney said Jonah needed peace. I wanted to stand and say, "Peace does not come with a boarding pass bought in secret." But Samuel touched my sleeve, so I waited. After 30 minutes, the judge ordered Jonah to remain in Maryland. Temporary kinship placement with me, pending further review. A social worker would visit my home. Darius and Whitney would have supervised contact until the court received more information. Darius stared at me as if I had stolen his son, when all I had done was refuse to let him be carried away like luggage. Samuel handed me the order outside the courthouse. "This is temporary, Mrs. Lawson." "I know." Temporary was not safety. Not yet. But for the first time since Ray died, Jonah had a piece of paper that protected him instead of using him. Karen Miles arrived on a Thursday with a clipboard, kind eyes, and shoes made for hard places. She was not cold, but she was not fooled by tears. Before she sat down, she looked through my house the way a nurse looks at a patient who says she is fine. She checked Jonah's room, the smoke detectors, the medicine cabinet, the refrigerator, and the small desk Lena carried from a thrift store. Jonah watched from the hallway. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. Karen knelt until she was eye level with him. "No, sweetheart. I'm here to make sure adults are doing their jobs." He looked at me, unsure whether to trust another grown-up. That was what Darius and Whitney had damaged most. They had made a child suspicious of comfort. The next weeks became court dates, counseling, school drop-offs, and supervised visits downtown. Jonah came home quiet after each one. Sometimes he lined his toy trucks in perfect rows. Sometimes he asked for cereal and did not eat it. The investigation moved in words no child should hear: subpoenas, fraud review, asset freeze. Ruth Ann kept working. The $438,000 now had invoices, login times, camera footage, PR contracts, and transfer confirmations. Whitney's office computer had touched the forged file after hours. Darius had approved 2 transfers with a code sent to his phone. When the walls closed in, their marriage opened like a rotten seam. Whitney's attorney claimed Darius was obsessed with being Ray's heir and pushed her to stabilize the estate. Darius's attorney said Whitney created the documents, chose the language, and used finance contacts. They had called themselves family when they wanted power. Now each one wanted to be the smaller thief. I did not let Jonah hear any of that from me. One night after a visit, I found him sitting on the edge of his bed in Ray's old cardigan. It swallowed his shoulders. "Grandma," he whispered, "are Mommy and Daddy in trouble because of me?" I sat beside him slowly, because some questions are so fragile you can break them by moving too fast. "No, baby." "But it was my account." "It had your name on it. That does not make it your fault." He rubbed one sleeve against his cheek. "Daddy said everybody was fighting because people wanted what was best for me." I closed my eyes for 1 second. "Listen to me, Jonah Marcus Lawson. Grown people are responsible for grown people's choices. You are not the reason they fell. You are the reason I stood up." His chin trembled. Then he leaned into me, and at last he cried like a child instead of a witness. Outside, Ashburton Street was dark and ordinary. A bus sighed at the corner. But in that small room, a boy finally let go of a burden that had never belonged to him. Jonah was at my kitchen table with a spelling worksheet. Lena was burning turkey bacon. Then Samuel called. Darius and Whitney had accepted their plea deals. Forged documents, misused money tied to Jonah, false bank statements, pressure on a grieving widow. They would serve time, repay what they could, and lose every claim to Ray's estate and the trusts. Neither would ever manage Jonah's money. Jonah looked from me to Lena. "Is Daddy coming home?" I did not lie. "Not for a while, baby." He nodded like he had expected worse, and that hurt more than crying. I did not celebrate my son going to prison. A mother does not dance over that kind of ruin. But memory is not a pardon. Love is not a blindfold. Blood is sacred, but it is not a license. Holloway Row stayed standing. Lena refused the out-of-state sale and placed the properties under a community housing program. Rents stayed fair. Repairs were scheduled. Families who had packed boxes started unpacking. At the first residence meeting, Mrs. Odessa Green took both my hands. "Your Ray told us we would not be pushed out like trash," she said. "Today, you kept his word breathing." I tried to answer, but my throat closed. Lena stood beside me with a clipboard, not trying to become the new crown. She was simply doing the work. That was how I knew Ray had chosen right. Jonah remained with me under long-term guardianship. Adoption stayed a door down the road, not a miracle overnight. He had counseling, pancakes on Saturdays, bad dreams sometimes, better mornings more often. One afternoon, I watched him wobble down the sidewalk on a blue bicycle Lena found secondhand. "Grandma, don't let go!" he shouted. "I already did," I called. He looked back and realized he was riding on his own. Lena laughed from the porch steps, a real laugh, the kind that did not ask permission. In my hallway hangs a new photograph. Me, Lena, Jonah, and Mrs. Green by Holloway Row. Ray is not in the picture, but he is in every brick that stayed home. Some nights grief still finds me, but I no longer stitch lies together so other people can call us a family. Peace is not everyone returning to the same table. Peace is knowing which chairs must stay empty. And I am old enough to bury a husband, not weak enough to bury the truth. Life taught me that forgiveness does not mean handing the key back to the person who burned your house. If this story touched you, please leave a like for the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you are listening from. Thank you for staying with me until the end. May you be healthy, protected, and loved without being owned. Until the next story, this is Voices of Aunt Etta.